part of the reason why I'm fighting so much anger and contempt is, I spent, since Trump came down that stupid escalator in 2015, I spent an enormous amount of time complaining about right-wingers, alt-righters, gripers, whatever you want to call these people, playing footsie with anti-Semites on the right. And not just anti-Semites, bigots of all shapes and sizes. I always took very seriously the sort of National Review mandate that, responsible conservatives, National Review, it took time for it to get there. But it saw itself as in part as sort of like the Texas Rangers riding the frontier between the swamplands and civilization. And, William F. Buckley, reading out the Birchers, have his troubles with, his broadside against Pat Buchanan. One of the things that, National Review took very seriously was the poisonousness of anti-Semitism on the right. And I think Bill was heroic about that, less than heroic about the race stuff, which we've talked about plenty of times. But NR came around on all of that stuff as well. And then in 2015, I know I've talked about this before, late 2015, early 2016, thanks in part to like Steve Bannon and a lot of Russian troll farms and a lot of other things, Jewish journalists of the left and the right started getting viciously attacked by the alt-right. And this was the era where, they would start putting parentheses around Jewish last names to signal that these were, filthy Jews and all that kind of stuff. And I just was so disheartened and so pissed off at many of my, legitimate friends on the right, both professionally and personally, who kind of rolled their eyes at people like me or Jay Nordlinger or anybody else making a big deal about this, saying that this is really bad, that these people should not be part of the conservative coalition. There's some people who need to be outside the tent. And you can have as big a tent as you want, but the idea that somehow it's my hangups, my unreasonableness, that I don't want to be in a tent with people who tell me that the world would be better off if Hitler gassed my great grandparents, or send me pictures of me or David French's daughter or whoever in gas chambers and Trump in an SS uniform hitting the gas button. I can't tell you how much of that crap I got. I think the ADL listed me as the 6th biggest recipient of anti-Semitic attacks on social media. And again, I'm not saying this to be a victim. A lot of it was just, to use a somewhat apt phrase, Sturm und Drang. But I kind of, since then, have made it a point to say, like, that conservatives need to denounce and speak up about the utter garbage on their own side, as a matter of principle, as a matter of integrity, as a matter of just common decency. And then, so fast forward to this last week, I watch all of these elite institutions, particularly college campuses and whatnot, struggle to come up with a clear denunciation of a bunch of terrorists who break into people's homes. We don't have to go through the whole litany. It doesn't, as a matter of symbolism, the beheading babies thing is useful in the sense that it is just so beyond the pale depraved and evil as an image, so disturbing at a visceral level. It really kind of sweeps away almost all equivocation and argument. But you know what? So does setting fire to babies. So does shooting babies. So does shooting, kids in front of their parents and parents in front of their kids. We don't know right now how many women were raped, but you can be sure that the women who were taken hostage, sure, you can surmise, or it would be it would not be unreasonable to expect that many of them will be raped. There's videos of Hamas guys who were captured who were saying the plan was to rape them. Now, those were released by the IDF, so you want to be super skeptical about that. But, you know, put it this way. I mentioned this on the Dispatch podcast yesterday before I had to jump off because of this crazy hacking thing. I watched this guy on CNN, this man, originally from Ireland. I'm sure you could find it. Maybe we'll put in the show notes. He was interviewed where you could just tell how racked with agony this guy was. His 8-year-old daughter was on a sleepover, and that was one of the houses that was broken into.
They just said, we found Emily. She's dead. And I went, yes! I went, yes, and smiled. Because that is the best news of the possibilities that I knew. That was the best possibility that I was hoping for.
And we actually spoke with one man, originally from Ireland, who was separated from his 8-year-old daughter. She had gone to a sleepover at a friend's house who also lived in the kibbutz. And he described to us the agonizing moment after 2 days of waiting for answers. He was rescued. He finally found out that his 8-year-old daughter, Emily, had been killed.
She was either dead or in Gaza. And if you know anything about what they do to people in Gaza, that is worse than death. That is worse than death. The way they treat you. They'd have no food, they'd have no water. She'd be in a dark room filled with Christ knows how many people and terrified every minute, hour, day, and possible years to come. So death was a blessing, an absolute blessing.
And he thought for several days that she'd been kidnapped by Hamas. And then he finally gets word that no, she'd actually been killed. And he's recounting this and he said, I yelled, yes. And he's saying this through sobs. And his point was that the months or years of torture and abuse that he was sure his 8-year-old daughter would be put through as a Hamas captive would be worse than a quick, if albeit tragic and barbaric death. And this was not some cold-hearted, weird, Werner Herzog, bleak nihilism that was coming out of this guy. He was so disgusted with to be in a kind of world where any father would have that reaction to the news of his 8-year-old, and she was an adorable girl, his 8-year-old daughter's death. And so anyway, you've seen the videos, you know what I'm talking about. These atrocities, some of the atrocities are so bad that the normal atrocities don't seem so bad anymore. But, shooting a bunch of people in the back at a concert, bunch of, by the way, mostly from what I have read and can tell, hippy dippy kind of peacenik, pro two-state solution, conscientious objector type, Israelis were mowed down unless they were taken hostage or raped or something, right? And it's at this moment that hundreds, thousands, it's hard to tell with different campuses, different protest groups, different fringe groups. But this is the moment where protests, letter writers, signatories of petitions, whatever, the usual suspects who get interviews on cable TV and go on and on and on. This is the moment where they say we need to express our solidarity with the Palestinians. This is the moment where they say their heart aches for the Palestinians. I can't tell you how many of those kinds of statements from squad types and whoever I've seen where their initial reaction to the wanton premeditated slaughter of civilians, including children, is to immediately feel sorry for the plight of the Palestinians. Now, I've written about this twice now, so I can't belabor it anymore. But this inherent disconnect, this logical nonsense. Sorry, words don't come easy. Where you have people say, lots and lots of people, that this is resistance, this is decolonization, this is the authentic voice of the Palestinian people. This is what you get when you mistreat a people for so long. They say this when Hamas murders people, as to legitimize it and make it the authentic expression of the righteous grievances of an oppressed people. But then the second Israelis respond or retaliate, the same people will say how outrageous or even how genocidal it is to target, which Israel's not doing, but to kill innocent bystanders, Palestinian civilians. Which is it? Either Hamas is the authentic and legitimate representation of the popular will of the Palestinian people, and they are doing what the Palestinian people want, or they're not. If I go around saying the average Palestinian is a terrorist and a murderer, which I don't believe, but if I go around saying something like that, I would be accused of fomenting genocidal rhetoric, of bigotry against innocent, Palestinians who just want a normal life. But the defenders of Hamas are the ones who are saying Hamas is simply an extension of the legitimate and authentic and justified views of the Palestinian people. They're the ones who are ascribing collective guilt to the Palestinians when they make those arguments.